Everyday Me, Everyday God. Hi, I'm Vanessa again, and something I wanted to process out loud a little bit and share with you is this idea I've been thinking about for a few weeks. I've called it in my head the Ministry of Insults. It's kind of a provocative title, and I mean a lot more than insults. I kind of mean the ministry of conflict, how conflict and injuries and insults can be a means of grace in our lives. But let me just share where this has come from. I've been memorizing passages again in the Bible for about the last year. Whenever something catches my eye, I would say every few months or so, I take a little bit of the context around that verse and have been memorizing it. And this recent one I've memorized has really confounded or perplexed me. Um, I'll share it with you now. It's Isaiah 50, verses 4 to 9. The Lord God has given me the tongue of a teacher, that I may know how to sustain the weary with a word. Morning by morning, God wakens my ear to listen as those who are taught. The Lord God has opened my ear, and I was not rebellious. I did not turn backward. I gave my back to those who struck me, and my cheeks to those who pull out the beard. I did not hide my face from insult and spitting. The Lord God has been my help, therefore I will not be disgraced. Therefore I have set my face like flint, and I know that I will not be put to shame, for the one who vindicates me is near. Who will contend with me? Let us stand together. Who are my adversaries? Let them confront me. The Lord God has been my help, therefore I will not be put to shame. Who will declare me guilty? They will wear out like a garment. The moth will eat them up. Isn't that a fascinating passage? The part I had read that I really loved was the first part. The Lord God has given me the tongue of a teacher, that I may know how to sustain the weary with a word. Like sustaining the weary with a word was so evocative to me. And so I just, memorized a bit around it and then found myself repeating as I walked to school to pick up my son and as I waited in line at things. Lines like, I did not hide my face from insults and spitting. I gave my back to those who struck me, and my cheeks to those who pull out the beard. And there's language around disgrace, being disgraced, or not being disgraced, and not being put to shame. So I just was sitting with this for a couple weeks, wondering, what does this mean for me? It was clear to me from the beginning that the author of this poem, or the singer of this song, the prayer of this prayer, had such a different experience in life than me. And because I've been learning more about white privilege and white supremacy and white fragility, I thought, wow, this is the experience of someone who does not experience white privilege or fragility. They say, who will contend with me? Let us stand together. Who are my adversaries? Let them confront me. Who will declare me guilty? There's like a lot of backbone, a lot of dignity I hear in those statements. Not a lot of perfectionism, not a lot of fear of conflict, which are things I identify with and I think are part of my white fragility. So, I felt multiple feelings about that, about praying this psalm from someone who has experienced discrimination and oppression and persecution and insults and abuse, and wondering, what does this have to say to me? Like, what do I do with this? So there's a lot for me to learn from it. I was convicted about my own sensitivity to conflict and to not doing things right and not being liked or making mistakes. So I just think that has been sinking in a little bit with me, and I don't know completely what to make of it. But here's something. Okay, so I was repeating these verses, and then I'm reading this wonderful book, To Pray and to Love, by Roberta Bondi, about the desert fathers and mothers. And I probably noticed this quote because of this passage. That's like that's how it works. What you're kind of meditating on is what you suddenly have eyes to see. And so she's talking about the role of prayer in helping us with our need for approval from others, basically freeing us from that. And so she says that, the role of insults was really important in the novices' lives. And so she does talk about insults in here. So she says that Abba Isaiah, this desert father, was known to say, "Nothing is so useful to the beginner as insults. The beginner who bears insults is like a tree that is watered every day." Nothing is so useful to the beginner or to the disciple as insults. The beginner who bears insults is like a tree that is watered every day. And I mean, I could show you, but I've started it, and when I read this, I was like, what does that mean? What does it mean in light of the fact that I've been, rehearsing this passage from Isaiah, someone who has experienced insults and has learned not to hide their face, who has learned not to be ashamed, even in the midst of being insulted or persecuted or discriminated against. This all sounds to me like something Howard Thurman would talk about. He's a hero of mine, and he wrote a book called Jesus and the Disinherited, and it's two people like this author whose backs are up against the wall, and it's telling them and inspiring them, empowering them, and encouraging them to act with creative, courageous integrity, even in the situation that this author is in. So again, I'm like, what is there for me to learn about this? I've never thought about insults in my life, which is a sign of my privilege. But I have really been tormented when conflict arises and when someone's mad at me or I'm misunderstood or I'm in a conflict with a friend that's unresolved because there's so many conflicts relating in the world. So I did have the opportunity to practice some of this, and the way it worked out for me, the reason why I've been thinking about the ministry of insults or the ministry of conflict is because I've had a couple experiences since I'm kind of aware of this stuff right now, where when I am in a kind of conflict with someone, what it feels for me is like we're sewn together. We're like a cloth or we're a garment. The end of the passage says they will wear out like a garment, like garments do. So my relationships with people in the world is like a garment, and we're sewed together. And when there's a conflict or an offense or something that I feel misunderstood in or frustrated about or resentful over, it's like there's a little tear in that garment, like a couple stitches have come out. And I've noticed that my instinct when that happens, it happens pretty regularly in little ways, like a little stitch starts to come out, but then a couple times a year for me, it happens in a bigger way where there's something to work out, or I have a lot of feelings about something. It feels like a couple stitches are free, are loose, and my instinct is to want to sew that up ASAP. Like, what can I do to get us back to normal, to where we used to be, to get back to that place of being sewn up. So sewn up for me feels good. It feels comfortable. It feels safe. It makes me feel secure. But because of this passage and that quote, that insult quote, when I did have a conflict with a friend, a couple friends, and I felt that the stitches loose, so uncomfortable, just like, oh my gosh, I'm having so many feelings. I want to fix this. What do I do to fix this right away? I thought, you know what? Maybe what this passage is talking about, and maybe what that quote from Abba Isaiah is talking about for me right now, is to resist that instinct to sew everything back to normal, to go back to the way it used to be in these relationships, and to sit with the discomfort of having that tear. It feels like my ego just got bruised, or, my sense of being liked and in good standing or understood has been jeopardized, and I want to fix it. And instead of fixing it right away, I felt like the invitation for me was to not do anything for 24 hours or for longer, and to sit with that discomfort of being a few stitches looser than I like to be, and to wonder if actually this was an invitation to become unattached from a sense of self and identity that is not actually that useful. And to maybe I'm a couple stitches more free to own my identity in God, in a bigger thing, to be rooted and grounded in an identity that is not so susceptible to bumps and bruises and tears. Is this making any sense? And it kind of worked. Like, I feel like it was so uncomfortable for me to sit with that, but by the next day it wasn't the end of the world, and I feel like I didn't react as impulsively and try to people please my way, that I actually sat with some of the conflict. I actually let some of the feedback that was difficult for me to hear sink in. And I actually had time to process, okay, what is mine to own in this situation and what isn't? And what's the invitation for growth? And what would take courage for me? And what's an act of love? And then what's an act of people pleasing and just reinforcing a way of being in the world that I actually do want to become more free from, because it's not loving for me or anyone I actually love to be so in need of us to be stitched up. That doesn't sound like intimacy, and that doesn't sound like brave relating. So this is why I'm thinking about the ministry of insults. Like, what if insults and conflict for people like me with a lot of privilege and a lot of sensitivity to the way people feel and what people are experiencing and how I'm perceived, a lot of perfectionism. What does it look like for us to welcome or embrace moments of conflict or being misunderstood or someone being mad at us as an opportunity to get a little bit more free? The way that it came out in my prayer during that week, this was 2 weeks ago, where I felt like a lot of opportunities to practice this. When I was so uncomfortable, I just felt like, I don't even know sports analogies really, but it felt like when, there's like draft picks going on and someone is between agents, and I feel like they're called a free agent and they don't have someone who owns them yet. And I felt like my identity, when it was like this, was a little bit more of a free agent. And I just said very non-eloquently, God, I feel like my identity is a little more up for grabs right now, and I want you to grab it. Like, could you claim me, or could you woo me, or like, I don't know how to choose you more than saying in this moment, I don't feel that great about myself, and I want to fix it. But I'm going to give you access to me. Now's your chance. Like, this is a very time sensitive opportunity for me to get a little more free from the false self and a little more rooted and grounded in something that's more true. That's all I have to share. I don't know if it will relate to other people, but there it is, the ministry of insults, the ministry of conflicts, these rifts and bruises and misunderstandings as opportunities, being 3 stitches freer to claim our identity as beloved, as daughter of God, as human, as person.